Greetings everyone, and today I'm checking out a popular zoom lens for Fuji's GFX system medium format cameras, the GF32-64mm f4 RLMWR. It's the full frame equivalent of 25-51mm with the equivalent depth of field of about f3.2. So it's not going to be the most creative lens in the world, but it does offer lovely wide angles, and if it can resolve 102 megapixels, then that's the key takeaway for many GFX shooters. In some ways, it's like the original zoomable kit lens that hit the market with the GFX system back in 2017. When bought by itself, the lens is priced at $2,300 and in the UK about £2,100, which is certainly expensive, but it's sometimes a bit cheaper if bought with a camera, and you can also find quite a few used copies on eBay at a much lower price. But that's not to say the lens has a weak reputation. It's actually considered by its users to be excellent, nice and sharp and flexible, and while its zoom range mostly just covers wider angles, well, when you're shooting at 102 megapixels, you can always crop in for a tighter image. I'd like to thank Fuji UK for loaning me this lens for a few weeks over Christmas for testing, although as usual, this is a totally independent review. The first thing to note about the lens is that it's really big. It's like the kit lens to end all kit lenses, and at 875 grams or nearly 2 pounds, it's fairly heavy also. Its construction is a mixture of metal and plastic to keep the weight down, and it's well weather sealed with a nice gasket around the huge rear Fuji GF mount. Then comes an aperture ring, which has nice positive clicks every third of an f-stop and can also be locked in or out of automatic mode, a handy feature. The largest control on the lens's body is the rubberized zoom ring, which turned lovely and smoothly on this copy of the lens without falling under its own weight. Then comes the rubberized manual focus ring, which again turns beautifully smoothly. The focus response to turning that ring is a little jerky, like on other Fuji system lenses, but the good news to see here is that you don't really see very much focus breathing, whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out. The lens's autofocus motor runs very quickly, quietly and accurately, no real issues here at all. The lens has a 77mm filter size, comes with a decent sized plastic hood, and it does not feature image stabilization, but then again, most new GFX cameras have stabilization built in nowadays. Overall, the build quality is absolutely fine here, and the extensive weather sealing is a nice bonus. Just bear in mind that this thing is bigger than you might think. More importantly though comes image quality, and I'm not taking any prisoners here. I'm testing it out today on a 102 megapixel camera, the Fuji GFX100 Mark II. These are all going to be images with Fuji's in-camera corrections turned on. At 32mm straight from f4, image quality in the middle is almost razor sharp with very good contrast. I can tell you now that the middle doesn't get any sharper than this as you stop the lens down. So let's look in the corners. They are looking a little softer with a touch of blue colour fringing on contrasting edges, but the picture is still pretty decent considering the crazy resolution we're shooting at. f5.6 looks about the same, but f8 looks nicely sharp in those corners now, with contrast looking excellent. f11 looks about the same, but at f16 or f22 the image starts to get softer again due to the effect of diffraction. Alright, well, let's zoom into 64mm. At f4, the middle of the image still looks excellent, with great resolution and very good contrast. The corners look just a little better than they did at 32mm, being only a little softer than the middle this time. Stop down to f5.6 for a nice improvement, and at f8 and f11, the image is almost razor sharp from corner to corner. Again though, stop down to f16 or further, and the image just gets softer again due to diffraction. Still, considering the crazy resolution we're shooting at here, it's overall a great performance from the lens. After all, how many zoom lenses have you ever seen which can resolve almost 102 megapixels of detail? Alright, well, let's move on and bypass Fuji's automatic corrections by processing some raw images with third-party software in order to take a look at distortion and vignetting. At 32mm there's a touch of barrel distortion here, but nothing serious at all. The corners really suffer from vignetting at f4 though. Stop down to f5.6 or f8 for those corners to brighten up. Zoom into 64mm and that distortion flips into a pincushion pattern, although again it's nothing too serious. Again, we see vignetting at f4, which quickly brightens up at f5.6 or f8. So if you're shooting RAW, you'll at least want to make sure that vignetting is corrected. When you're zoomed into your subject, this lens's minimum focus distance is about 60 centimeters, although it can focus down to 50 centimeters when zoomed out. That's nothing special, but I've seen worse. Anyway, close-up image quality remains quite sharp, but contrast is suffering. Stop down to f5.6 or f8 though, and close-up image quality becomes much punchier. Let's take a look at how the lens performs against bright lights. It's just an average performance here for such a high-spec optic. Contrast remains nice and high, crucially, but spots of flaring are also quite visible. While we're working in the dark, let's take a look at coma levels. At f4, the good news is that no coma can really be seen here at all, just a little natural glaring from all those bright lights. Let's zoom out and look for sunstars then. You'll have to stop down to f11 for those to begin to appear, and at f16, f22 and f32 they gradually get bigger and brighter, as you can see. Next, bokeh. Although the maximum aperture of the lens is only f4, the larger medium format sensor means that out of focus backgrounds are quite possible if you zoom in a little bit. Those backgrounds look lovely and soft, lending themselves nicely to portrait pictures. Although more difficult backgrounds sometimes have just a slight, subtle complexity to them. Very subtle though. Okay then, overall, how about that for a kit lens? Its zoom range is not very big, and its maximum aperture hardly super bright, but the handling and the optical characteristics of this lens are very nice indeed. Its images have a wonderful feel to them, and they're also very sharp. This lens is big and expensive, but if you want a zoomable option that can cover you for almost 102 megapixels of detail, then this is it. So if you can stomach its price, or at least get a good deal on it, it does come recommended. Alright, now that was the first ever medium format zoom lens that I've tested, having a year of firsts on this channel so far. Medium format photography is not for everyone though, it's certainly a challenge, but having a zoom lens in your kit makes it all a little easier, while still rewarding. Anyway, a special thanks to all my Patreon supporters who make such a big difference to keeping this YouTube channel going. Check out my Patreon page in the description below, where supporters get all kinds of exclusive bonus content. Ciao for now, everyone.